Cemetery. The reason why it is called South Pacific Cemetery is because this is part of a huge cemetery complex. And this was, even though, I mean, we can see the large number of cars coming down the street, it's almost a heart of Calcutta today, as it were, but at a point in time, this was absolutely uninhabited. Huge amount of forest all around, and this Park Street was known as Burial Ground Road, right? Because this is the point to which all funeral processions, corteges came, and this was the end of the journey, so to speak. But and the reason for that was that this was situated about as far as possible from what might be called White Calcutta, the place where most Europeans live. That is the area around that was known as Dalhousie, now BBD Bar, and its adjoining regions, particularly centered around Lal Dighi, or the pool that we have, the center of BBD Bar. So this is how the road came, and the reason for taking this road for burials was, interestingly, to keep the site of frequent funeral processions away from the site of women. They would get too upset with so many funeral processions coming in. So this is South Park Street Cemetery. On the other side you have North Park Street Cemetery. I would like you to take a look at that. There is just one tomb, as you can see, one representative tomb on the other side. There's the only tomb which is standing. Eventually this became full. It was opened in 1767. It was declared full by 1790. So you can estimate the number of burials that took place during this brief period. Then North Park Street Cemetery was used. Once North Park Street Cemetery became full, the next move around 1840 was again across the street to what is now known as the Lower Circular Road Cemetery, or the Mollik Bajar Cemetery. So this is a huge cemetery complex, and innumerable number of people buried here. So we come along, and this is, of course, kind of grand entrance, as it were. You must keep in mind that this was one of the earliest, probably the first planned cemetery in all of Asia. Keep in mind what Kipling said. Now, Kipling said two things. First of all, he called this a necropolis. The second thing he said, look, the reason why there are these huge tombs is because probably men at that point in time wanted to bury their friends under such mounds of masonry that they did not want them to rise up again. Now, this being one of the interesting aspects, I draw your attention, of course, to the large number of women here, and also buried here, as compared to probably a slightly lower percentage of men. Of course, there are many such small tombs, and these are all tombs of children. The child death rate, mortality, is very high. It's not a phenomenon unusual to India. They are all over the world. The reason being that pediatrics as a science was far from evolving, and what medical practitioners usually did was to simply reduce by a certain percentage, based on experience, the same limited pharmacopoeia that was used to treat adults. So this was entirely unsuitable, and children, of course, have their own ailments and specific ways of addressing these ailments, which was absent then and would be absent for a very long time, and hence this unfortunately high mortality rate. But not just for children, also you must keep in mind that gynecology or diseases of women were again not really recognized, not at all recognized as a separate medical specialty. So you have again a large number of women dying, and for instance, here you have the tomb of Mrs. Anne Hayes, the wife of Thomas Hayes, who died this life aboard a ship, for instance, aged 26 years. And I draw your attention to the pathetic tomb inscription full of sorrow and the permanence of death in a world without visual memory.
I also draw your attention to this tomb, which is Mrs. Martha Goodland, who departed this life 21st March 1785. This is a very old tomb, as you can see, and I again, it might not be really possible to read the entire inscription, but well, this is a very long inscription, poetic, and of course also pathetic, full of sorrow. Somebody who died age 23. Large number of women dying in their 20s. And again, both the limitations of medical science and the fact that they came to India, they fell victim to a number of diseases which might not have afflicted them equally in Europe. This cemetery represents the age of Warren Hastings. Probably beginning just before his well, quite some time before his taking over as Governor General. But of course, you will find that most of that all the people buried here were obviously dead by 1790, except in certain cases where there were family tombs where years took place after that. So this is the tomb of Mary Bowers. He's supposed to have been one of the survivors of the infamous Black Hole incident. It was very controversial. Nonetheless, it just goes to show you how interesting and ancient this cemetery is. And now we move on to other tombs. There were a number of doctors also who fell prey to the same diseases, because it was not disease but death that was great level of Europeans in Calcutta and Bengal at that point in time. Here we have the tomb of John Campbell, MD, an assistant surgeon in the service of the East India Company, who died of a fever at the Presidency General Hospital in 1803. Now, I'm sorry, 1803, at a very early age of 24. Now, this is just an example of this kind of trained persons who were not spared from the same diseases. Same thing, we also have other very famous doctors who in their time were known to have written some of the best textbooks on diseases of India, diseases of Bengal, as we shall see a little later. The next tomb, of course, is one that is very famous because it is associated with the name of Walter Savage Landor. And I'm sure you're aware of his name, his famous poet. And of course, this is the tomb of Rose Aylmer. Now, the unique thing about the tomb is of course, it's inverted, it's flute-like structure. It's got this fluted tomb, this obelisk which is fluted.
This is the tomb of Charles Weston. Right? Charles Weston was a Eurasian. He was a very powerful man in his time. He was on the Bengal Council. He trained to be a surgeon under Holwell. Holwell, the man who wrote the first account of the black hole.
So these are the walkway, and of course you can sit and spend some time. Of course, please keep in mind that all this was full of tombs which have since disappeared, given away to time. This series of tombs, right? They're almost kind of similar. But they're of course all family vaults, and the unique architecture is interesting. They've all survived. And of course, in between you find interspersed these little smaller tombs which are the tombs of children.
So there were a lot of people who were posted in the army as well as the regiment?
Yes, there were a large number of army officers, and of course officers in the company service, in the Honorable East India Company service, HEIC service, which is to be known at that time. Yes, and of course it would mainly be three kinds of people. Persons employed by the East India Company, then you have, that is handled by the civil service, army officers and naval officers and their and the only Indian variant was
Hindu Charles Stuart is a very interesting figure because he is believed to have walked down from Wood Street where he lived to the Ganges, right? Every morning, bare-bodied, to have a bath in the Ganges. His opinions were not precisely Hindu as in Hindu in rigid religious terms, but more given to a perception of Hinduism as something which was tolerant, probably more the kind of thing that we talk about nowadays, like more expansive, more accepting. And it is believed that he was buried with a number of idols that he worshipped every day. Like in this case, in this sense, mind you, he was a very rule-keeping Hindu, right? So of course he wasn't a Hindu in that sense. Charles Stuart was really a phenomenon in his time.
Right. You have the concept of Hindu coming in because of British. Would you be able to say something?
Yes, I mean yes. This is something very interesting. And why was he given this nickname of Hindu?
Yes.
The reason he was given this nickname of Hindu is because they saw it as a kind of aberration.
Exactly.
I mean, after all, you could kind of overcome racism. You need not be racist. You need not be worried about the color of the skin. But so far, when religious issues came up, I suppose there must have been some kind of a complaint on the part of general society, as it were, European society, that this is not what you were supposed to do. Some tombs were constructed right here, but some tombs, tombs were also kind of brought in pieces from Europe,
Right.
and so you could have them simply set up here. Look at the classical
Exactly.
carvings, right? You have the urns and you have the sorrowing mourners who have downed their torches and are carrying this wreath. The angels that have downed their torches. They wanted to erect tombs which were classical,
Yes.
but probably they were not really able to convey an exact idea of what they wanted to the Indian masons, and therefore you have a very interesting combination of two separate architectures. Right? The idea is essentially Western, but if you look at the cupolas, they are the Indian gombuch, the modified Indian gombuch. So this is a very interesting amalgamation of styles, of architectural styles. So you have obelisks, right? You have urns. Along with that, you have the gombuch too. Again, another walkway with tombs on either side, and a little way down we turn the other end of the road, we turn right, where I will show you some more tombs, including the one that belonged to the most beautiful woman of her time, Elizabeth Barwell. She married Richard Barwell, who was probably the richest man around. He was immensely wealthy, and of course you see that she passed away at a very young age. She died when she was 23. But I draw your attention again to the massiveness of this tomb. It's kind of equally, the pyramid stands for power and grief. An interesting combination. Richard Barwell went back to England. As I said, women fell prey to diseases more often because, like pediatrics, gynecology was yet to develop. This was yet to be recognized that women could have their own specific, gender-specific ailments, and that you need a medical science to deal with this exclusively. So, women's ailments were frequently overlooked to a great extent because women themselves considered, kind of not something to be really discussed, nor also something that was ignored. Medical practitioners tended not to identify something special for special treatment and so on and so forth.
There was a sense of taboo involved in it.
There are a number of factors which contributed to probably higher female mortality. Now there was an unhealthy period, and the unhealthy period ranged from approximately the end of the hot months until October. Usually the Europeans in Calcutta celebrated the fact that they had managed to survive that year's unhealthy period by several parties which were thrown after the 20th of October. So after the 20th of October, once the season had changed, once it was cooler, they felt that they more or less had managed to escape for that year. It's interesting here to note that Edward Wheeler's health began to decline in September, and that he was dead by the 10th of October. Now, another reason for this kind of for this would have been the absence of any of the limitations of the pharmacopoeia available to a medical practitioner. What was available? Bleeding, for instance, right? Venesection. Then there was calomel and other mercurials which were given, mercury being the only effective treatment against infection. But mercury, of course, was very debilitating. And then the third important thing was the use of cinchona, quinine. And quinine, again, in large quantities, didn't help unless it was malaria. Here is something very poignant. This is the tomb of a little boy, 4 years old, Warren Hastings Larkin. The intense pain of parents. They write about him as a child of uncommon intelligence, of uncommon perception.
The tomb of Sir William Jones, the most famous person buried in South Parkside Cemetery, because known, celebrated for his knowledge of India, of Indian languages and literatures. It is appropriate that his tomb should be the tallest one and easily identifiable. And of course it has been looked after with great care as we walk up to his tomb. I would like to draw your attention to the very unique sculpture where you have the urn and two kind of lowered, two reverse shovels. Also, the fact that Sir William Jones died of an ailment which was never diagnosed, of course, since diagnosis was very poor in any case at that time. He suddenly discovered that he had a tumor as big as his fist on the right side of his abdomen, and this grew worse over time until, of course, he suddenly died. It was thought at the time that he was getting better, but he didn't. So here is Sir William Jones's tomb, which is appropriately flourishing tomb, flourishing architecture with this pyramid representative of